The rifle components clattered to the ground in perfect sequence: barrel, stock, trigger assembly, scope, as if disassembled by invisible hands. Elena stumbled backward, her mouth open in a silent scream. The desert night, normally alive with sounds, fell unnaturally quiet. "What the hell was that?" Javier hissed, the knife in his hand now trembling against Miguel's ribs. His eyes darted between Elena's pale face and the dismantled rifle. Miguel seized the moment of distraction to twist away from the blade. "That," he said, voice steady despite his racing heart, was her first move. The outpost, little more than a reinforced shack perched on a rocky outcropping with commanding views of the smuggling routes below, had always felt claustrophobic. Now it felt like a trap. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered, casting erratic shadows across the walls adorned with cartel symbols and pin-up calendars. "This is bullshit," Javier spat, though his bravado couldn't mask the fear creeping into his voice. "Some trick to scare us off position, probably Federals with some new tech." Elena shook her head, finally finding her voice. "No one touched my rifle, no one was even near it." She was the newest recruit but had quickly earned respect for her marksmanship and cool head. Now that cool was evaporating like morning dew under the desert sun. "I felt cold, like something passed through me to reach the gun." The radio crackled again, though no one had touched the dial. This time, no words came through, just the sound of breathing, slow and measured, as if someone were standing right beside the microphone. Then, a woman's soft humming, a melody that seemed to bypass their ears and settle directly into their bones. Miguel recognized the tune, a lullaby his grandmother used to sing, about death coming as a beautiful woman to carry away the wicked. His hand moved instinctively to the small silver cross hidden beneath his shirt. "We need to leave, now." Miguel grabbed his go-bag from beneath the rickety table. "I've seen what happens next." Javier blocked the door, his muscular frame filling the narrow exit. At 35, he'd survived 15 years in the cartel through a combination of brutality and cunning. The silver scars crisscrossing his arms and face testified to battles won. "No one's going anywhere. El Jaguar pays us to hold this position, and that's what we'll do." "El Jaguar isn't here," Miguel countered. "5 years ago, I was with the Salazar crew when this same warning came. 8 men, Javier, all veterans, all armed to the teeth. I left, they called me coward too. By morning, they were gone. Not dead, gone. No bodies, no blood, just empty clothes and weapons like they'd been plucked right out of existence." Elena moved to the window, peering through the grime-streaked glass. "She's closer." Her voice had dropped to a whisper. "Walking straight up the path. No cover, no hesitation." Javier shouldered her aside to look for himself. The figure in black was indeed closer, perhaps half a kilometer now, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone taking a pleasant evening stroll rather than approaching a cartel outpost manned by killers. "1 woman against 3 of us with automatic weapons," Javier laughed, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I don't care if she's a ghost or government or rival cartel. She dies tonight." He grabbed the AK-47 leaning against the wall and checked the magazine. Full. The familiar weight of the weapon seemed to restore some of his confidence. "Elena, get your sidearm. Miguel, man the radio, call for backup." Miguel made no move toward the radio. "Backup won't come, not for this. Everyone knows what that warning means." "Then we handle it ourselves," Javier snarled, grabbing Miguel by the collar and shoving him against the wall. "You survived once by running. Maybe you're the one bringing her back. Maybe you're her spy." The accusation hung in the air, dangerous as a lit fuse. In the cartel, suspicion was often as fatal as guilt. "Think, Javier," Miguel said quietly. "Why would I warn you if I was working with her? I could have just slipped away while you were playing cards." A sound from outside interrupted them, footsteps on the gravel path leading to the outpost. Impossibly close now. Too close, too soon. Elena drew her pistol with shaking hands. "She can't have covered that distance so quickly. It's not possible." The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. The metal hinges groaned slightly, as if under pressure. The single bulb overhead flickered more intensely, then shattered, plunging the room into darkness broken only by the pale moonlight filtering through the dirty windows. "Shit!" Javier fumbled for his flashlight, clicking it on and sweeping the beam across the room. The door remained closed, but something had changed in the atmosphere. The air felt heavier, charged with electricity like the moments before a lightning strike. A soft tapping came from the window behind them. 3 gentle knocks, almost polite. All 3 spun toward the sound, Javier's flashlight beam cutting through the darkness to illuminate the glass. There was nothing there, just the endless desert night beyond. But as the beam moved away, the glass began to frost over, ice crystals forming impossible patterns in the desert heat. Words appeared in the frost, written by an unseen finger. "I know what you did at the village." Elena gasped. What village? What is she talking about? Miguel knew exactly which village. 3 months ago, El Jaguar had ordered them to make an example of a small farming community that had refused to pay protection money. The official report claimed a rival cartel had massacred the villagers. Only those who carried out the actual killings knew the truth. Javier's face hardened. Propaganda, mind games, but his voice lacked conviction. The temperature in the room plummeted suddenly, their breath fogging in the air. The radio switched on again by itself, this time blaring static at full volume before settling into a clear transmission. A woman's voice, soft as silk but sharp as a blade, filled the room. "Javier Mendez, Elena Cortez, Miguel Fuentes, I know your names, I know your sins, I know the nightmares that wake you screaming." Elena fired at the radio, the gunshot deafening in the confined space. The radio exploded in a shower of sparks, but the voice continued uninterrupted, now seeming to come from all around them. "The children of San Cristobal cry out for justice. 19 souls, 7 children. I have collected their tears." Javier opened fire, spraying bullets in a wild arc around the room, shredding the thin walls and shattering the remaining windows. When his magazine emptied, the sudden silence was broken only by the metallic ping of cooling bullet casings hitting the floor. The voice returned, now a whisper directly behind Javier's ear. "Your bullets cannot harm what you cannot understand." He whirled, slashing with his knife through empty air. "Show yourself, Bruja." A laugh like breaking glass answered him. The temperature dropped further, frost now creeping across the floor from the corners of the room. Miguel backed toward the door, hand finding the knob. "Last chance. We need to run, now." Elena seemed frozen in place, staring at something in the darkest corner of the room. "Her eyes," she whispered. "I can see her eyes." Miguel followed her gaze but saw only shadows. Then, for just a moment, 2 points of light reflected in the darkness, eyes watching them with patient hunger. Javier reloaded with trembling hands. Nothing human moves like that. Nothing human knows those things. "That's what I've been trying to tell you," Miguel hissed. "She's not human, not anymore." The door behind Miguel swung open of its own accord, revealing the moonlit path down the hillside. An invitation, or a trap. Elena suddenly screamed, dropping her pistol and clutching at her throat. "Something's touching me! Something's around my neck!" She clawed at an invisible force, gasping for air, her feet lifting several inches off the ground. Javier lunged toward her, but an unseen barrier stopped him cold. He pounded against nothing, watching helplessly as Elena's face turned purple. "Stop!" Miguel shouted into the darkness. "Please, she was just following orders." The pressure on Elena's throat eased slightly. She dropped to her knees, wheezing. "Orders?" The voice was contemplative now. "Always orders, the excuse of the damned throughout history." A black mist began to coalesce in the center of the room, swirling like ink in water, gradually taking the shape of a woman. Not solid, not quite transparent, something in between states of matter. Her features were indistinct except for those eyes, depthless and ancient. "Miguel Fuentes," the apparition said, her voice now coming from the vague area where a mouth would be. "You escaped me once. You warned your friends tonight. For these small mercies, I offer you the same choice as before. Leave now and live or stay and join my collection." Javier fired directly into the misty figure. The bullets passed through harmlessly, embedding themselves in the far wall. The woman in black turned her attention to him, the mist of her form flowing toward him like a predator closing in. Javier Mendez, 37 kills, 4 were children. You feel nothing for them but much for yourself. Javier backed away until he hit the wall. For the first time in his violent life, he knew true terror. What are you? I am what remains when justice fails. I am what waits in the darkness when the powerful believe they are safe. The mist surrounded him now, tendrils curling around his limbs. I am the consequence you thought you could escape. Miguel grabbed Alina's arm, pulling her toward the open door. We have to go, now. Alina stumbled to her feet, her eyes never leaving the scene before them. Javier was now completely enveloped in the black mist, his screams muffled as if coming from a great distance. Run, the woman in black said without turning. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them what comes for those who spill innocent blood. They didn't need to be told twice. Miguel and Alina burst through the door and raced down the rocky path, the sound of Javier's fatting screams pushing them faster than they'd ever moved. Behind them, the outpost's remaining lights flared brilliantly before extinguishing all at once, leaving the hilltop in perfect darkness. They reached the jeep parked at the base of the hill, Alina fumbling with the keys while Miguel kept watch, pistol drawn. The engine roared to life, and Alina slammed it into gear, tires spinning in the loose gravel before finding purchase. As they sped away, Miguel looked back one last time. A figure stood on the hilltop, solid now, a woman in flowing black watching them leave. She raised one hand, not in threat but in acknowledgement. The message was clear. She was letting them go. This time. What do we tell El Jaguar? Alina asked, her voice raw from the invisible strangling. Miguel touched the cross beneath his shirt. The truth, the woman in black has returned, and no one is safe. As if hearing his words, the radio in the jeep switched on by itself. Through the static, they heard her voice one final time. No one who deals in death is safe from me. Remember that, Miguel Fuentes. Our paths will cross again. The radio died, leaving them alone with the sound of the engine and their ragged breathing as they fled into the desert night, carrying a warning few would believe until it was too late. Dawn painted the eastern sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold as Detective Lucia Reyes pulled her unmarked sedan to a stop half a kilometer from the cartel outpost. The morning desert air still held the night's chill, and she tightened her jacket around her shoulders as she stepped out. Her partner, Detective Marco Vega, joined her, passing over a steaming cup of coffee from the thermos. Third sight this month, he said, squinting at the distant structure perched on the hilltop. Same pattern. Lucia nodded, taking a grateful sip. Anonymous tip called in at 3:17 a.m. By the time local officers arrived, everyone was gone. She didn't mention the black feather yet. That detail hadn't made it into the official reports of the previous incidents. They approached cautiously, following protocol despite the all-clear from the first responders. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the scene with unforgiving clarity. The outpost's walls were riddled with bullet holes, the windows shattered. Shell casings littered the floor inside, all from the same weapon, Lucia noted, fired in a circular pattern as if the shooter had been targeting something moving around the room. Panic fire, Marco observed, crouching to examine the casings. Whoever was shooting wasn't aiming at anything specific. Or they were aiming at everything, Lucia countered, moving deeper into the space. The interior told a story of chaos. Overturned furniture, playing cards scattered across the floor, 3 half-empty glasses of tequila. A dismantled rifle lay in one corner, each piece placed with puzzling precision, as if it had been taken apart for cleaning rather than in struggle. Temperature's off, Marco said suddenly, removing his jacket. Must be 15 degrees warmer in here than outside. Lucia had noticed it too, the oppressive heat that didn't match the morning coolness. She moved to what remained of a communications setup in the corner. The radio had been shot to pieces, but beside it, placed with deliberate care on the bullet-riddled table, was what she'd been expecting. A single black feather, its surface gleaming with iridescent hints of blue and purple in the sunlight. She didn't touch it, instead taking photos from multiple angles. "We've got another one," she said quietly. Marco joined her, frowning at the feather. "I don't get it. What kind of calling card is this? It's not from any bird native to this region." "It's not from any bird, period," Lucia replied. "Lab results came back yesterday on the previous samples. The molecular structure doesn't match any known avian species. It's not even organic material as we understand it." Marco stared at her. "What are you saying? It's fake?" "No," Lucia continued photographing the scene. "It's real, just not from anything in our scientific catalogs." Before Marco could respond, Lucia's phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number, just as before. She opened it to find coordinates followed by 3 words, 17 minutes. "Hurry." "We need to go," she said, already moving toward the door. "What? We haven't finished processing the scene." "Trust me on this," she showed him the text. "The last 2 times I received messages like this, they led to major cartel shipments. We have 17 minutes to get there." Marco hesitated only briefly before following her. They'd been partners for 3 years, and he'd learned to trust her instincts. "You going to tell me how you're getting these tips?" Lucia slid behind the wheel, punching the coordinates into her GPS. "I would if I knew." The location was only 8 minutes away at top speed, an abandoned church that had once served the small farming communities before the cartels had driven most of the residents away. They approached with caution, weapons drawn, using the crumbling stone walls for cover. The ancient wooden doors hung open, revealing the dim interior. Lucia checked her watch, 3 minutes to spare, according to the mysterious countdown. They entered silently, tactical training taking over as they cleared the space. The church was empty of people, but not of evidence. Stacked neatly in the center of the nave, directly beneath a hole in the roof where sunlight streamed down like a spotlight, were dozens of shrink-wrapped packages. Marco sliced open one corner of a package with his pocket knife and whistled softly. "Pure heroin, street value," he made a quick calculation. "At least 20 million. Lucia was more interested in what lay atop the stack, a manila folder containing photographs, documents, and a detailed ledger of the cartel's distribution network. Names, dates, amounts, bribes paid to officials. Everything a prosecutor would need to dismantle a significant portion of El Jaguar's operation. "This is impossible," Marco whispered, flipping through the documents. "Some of this information would require deep access, years of undercover work." A sound from the back of the church made them both spin, weapons raised. Nothing moved in the shadows. "Federal agents," Lucia called out. "Show yourself." Silence answered her. Then, a soft click from the ancient sound system that hadn't worked in decades. Static hissed from speakers long thought dead, followed by a woman's voice, the same one Lucia had heard in fragments of recovered audio from cartel communications. "The children of San Cristobal deserve justice, Detective Reyes. 19 souls, 7 children." Marco looked at Lucia in confusion. "What is this? Who's speaking?" Lucia shook her head, equally baffled. The massacre at San Cristobal had been attributed to a rival cartel, but the case remained unsolved. No witnesses had come forward. "I provide the evidence. You provide the justice," the voice continued. "You have 8 minutes before they arrive to retrieve their shipment." The speakers went silent. Marco was already on his radio, calling for backup, while Lucia continued to search the shadows of the church. Something moved near the confessional, a flicker of darkness deeper than the surrounding dimness. "Who are you?" Lucia called out, moving cautiously toward the confessional. No answer came, but as she approached, the temperature plummeted. Her breath fogged in the suddenly frigid air. The confessional door creaked open slightly, revealing nothing but darkness within. Lucia reached for the door, hesitated, then pulled it open fully. Empty, but on the seat lay another black feather and beneath it, a small, worn photograph. She picked it up carefully, a family portrait faded with age. A mother, father, and young girl, perhaps 7 years old, smiling in front of a modest home. She turned it over. Written in flowing script on the back, "Remember why you became a detective, Lucia. Some wounds never heal, but they can be avenged." Lucia's blood ran cold. The photograph was of her own family, taken weeks before they were killed in what was officially ruled a home invasion gone wrong. She had never believed that explanation. Her father had been a prosecutor building a case against the cartels. Their deaths had been no random act of violence. "Backup's 5 minutes out," Marco said, approaching. He noticed her expression. "What is it? What did you find?" Lucia pocketed the photograph before he could see it. "Nothing, just another feather." She handed it to him, her mind racing. How could anyone have that photograph? The originals had been destroyed in the fire that claimed her family home. The sound of approaching vehicles snapped her back to the present. "We've got company," she said, moving back to the cover of the stone walls. 3 SUVs with tinted windows pulled up outside the church. Men with automatic weapons poured out, taking defensive positions. "Federal agents," Marco shouted. "Drop your weapons." The response was immediate and violent, a hail of gunfire forcing them back into cover. Bullets chipped away at the ancient stone around them. "So much for backup," Lucia muttered, returning fire carefully, making each shot count. One of the cartel gunmen screamed suddenly, dropping his weapon and staggering backward as if pulled by an invisible force. His companions watched in horror as he was lifted several feet off the ground, suspended in midair, clawing at his throat. The gunfire ceased abruptly as all eyes fixed on the impossible sight. A swirling darkness gathered around the suspended man, coalescing into the vague shape of a woman. Though indistinct, her voice carried clearly across the churchyard. "Tell El Jaguar that his sins have not gone unnoticed. Tell him I am coming." The darkness released the man, who collapsed to the ground, gasping and trembling. His companions backed away, several making signs of the cross. Without another word, they retreated to their vehicles and sped away, leaving their shipment behind. Lucia and Marco emerged cautiously from cover, weapons still ready. "What the hell just happened?" Marco demanded, his face pale. Before Lucia could answer, the wail of approaching sirens announced their backup had finally arrived. The churchyard was soon swarming with federal agents securing the scene and the abandoned shipment. Captain Vargas arrived last, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the evidence. He pulled Lucia aside while the others worked. "Third incident this month," he said quietly. "All following the same pattern. Anonymous tip, Black Feather, cartel operation disrupted." Lucia nodded. "There's more to it this time," she spoke to us, through the church speakers. Vargas's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "You're sure it was a woman?" "Yes, and she," Lucia hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "She knew about San Cristobal, called it a massacre, not a cartel conflict." The captain was silent for a long moment. "Walk with me," he finally said, leading her away from the others. When they were out of earshot, he spoke in a low voice. 20 years ago, when I was a rookie, I heard stories from the old-timers. Stories about a woman who hunted cartel members. They called her La Mujer de Negro." "The woman in black," Lucia finished. "Yes, the stories said she could move through shadows, appear in multiple places at once, that she collected the souls of those who spilled innocent blood." Vargas shook his head. "I dismissed it as superstition, border folklore. And now I've seen too many inexplicable things to dismiss anything." He fixed her with a penetrating stare. "The texts you're receiving, they started after the first incident with the feather, didn't they?" Lucia nodded reluctantly. "She's chosen you, Detective Reyes. The question is why." The photograph burned in Lucia's pocket, but she kept that secret to herself. "What do we know about her? Where did she come from?" "The stories vary. Some say she was a mother whose family was killed by cartels. Others claim she's the vengeful spirit of all the disappeared women of Juarez. The most detailed account I've heard suggests she was a federal agent who went deep undercover in the cartels. Something happened, something that changed her." "Changed her into what?" Lucia asked. Vargas shrugged. "Something not entirely human anymore." Their conversation was interrupted by a shout from one of the agents. They hurried back to find the team gathered around the stack of drugs and evidence, staring at something on top that hadn't been there before, a small digital recorder. Marco pressed play, and the woman's voice filled the churchyard. The next shipment arrives tomorrow at midnight. Coordinates to follow. Bring only those you trust completely, Detective Reyes. Your department has been compromised. A heavy silence fell over the group. Accusations of corruption within federal law enforcement weren't new, but this was different, specific and directed. Captain Vargas took charge. This evidence is now classified. No one discusses what happened here today. He turned to Lucia. Detective Reyes, I want you to lead the investigation into these incidents. Detective Vega will assist. As the team dispersed to complete processing the scene, Lucia's phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Check on Miguel Fuentes. Motel Sonora, room 12. He survived the outpost. Across the border, Miguel huddled in his dingy motel room, jumping at every shadow. He hadn't slept since fleeing the outpost with Alina. They'd separated at dawn, each believing they'd be safer apart. El Jaguar didn't tolerate failure, and abandoning a post was punishable by death, supernatural encounter or not. The television flickered with poor reception, the local news providing background noise to keep the silence at bay. Suddenly, the screen went to static before resolving into crystal-clear surveillance footage of his own room, from angles where no cameras existed. Miguel froze, watching himself on the screen, sitting on the edge of the bed. The footage zoomed in slowly on his terrified face. Text appeared across the bottom of the screen. They're coming for you in 17 minutes. Second drawer. He lunged for the bedside table, yanking open the second drawer. Inside lay a loaded pistol he hadn't put there, a key fob for a vehicle, and a burner phone. The phone buzzed in his hand with a text message. Federal Agent Lucia Reyes is looking for you. She can offer protection in exchange for testimony. Your choice, run or redeem yourself. Miguel's hands trembled as he weighed his options. He'd seen what the woman in black could do. He'd also seen what El Jaguar did to traitors. The phone buzzed again. 12 minutes now. They're already in the parking lot. Decision made, Miguel grabbed the gun and key fob, shoving the phone in his pocket. As he cracked the door to peer outside, he saw them, 2 SUVs with tinted windows pulling into the motel parking lot. El Jaguar's cleanup crew, led by a figure he recognized with shock, Javier, who had mysteriously reappeared after that night at the outpost. But something was wrong with Javier. Even from a distance, Miguel could see he moved stiffly, mechanically. And just visible behind his ear was a small black mark, like a feather tattooed into his skin. Miguel slipped out the back window, spotting a motorcycle parked exactly where he needed it to be. The key fob unlocked it, and within seconds he was roaring away from the motel, the wind carrying away the sound of gunfire erupting behind him. The burner phone guided him with turn-by-turn directions, leading him toward the border and what he hoped would be salvation, or at least survival. As he rode, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not with hostility but with expectation. Above him, a single black feather drifted on the wind, keeping pace no matter how fast he rode. The fortress-like compound of El Jaguar sat nestled in the mountains, 20 miles from the nearest town, and surrounded by a landscape as unforgiving as the man himself. High walls topped with razor wire encircled the property, with armed guards patrolling at regular intervals. Security cameras covered every approach, their feeds monitored 24/7 in a state-of-the-art control room. By all accounts, it was impenetrable. Inside the main house, 13 men gathered around a massive oak table in a room designed to intimidate. Mounted animal heads stared down from the walls, including the snarling jaguar that had given Alejandro Vargas his cartel name. The room smelled of expensive cigars, aged tequila, and fear. El Jaguar himself sat at the head of the table, his face impassive as he listened to the reports of his lieutenants. At 53, he had survived 3 decades in the business through ruthless efficiency and an almost supernatural ability to sense betrayal before it happened. The silver at his temples and the network of scars on his hands were the only visible signs of his violent journey to the top. 3 outposts hit in a month, he summarized after the last report. Shipments seized, men vanished, intelligence leaked to federals. His voice remained calm, which terrified his subordinates more than any shouting could. And now I hear whispers of La Mujer de Negro. The room grew noticeably colder at the mention of the name. Several of the men shifted uncomfortably. Superstition, said Raul Ortega, El Jaguar's second-in-command. Stories to frighten the weak-minded. Is it superstition that dismantled the Salazar operation 5 years ago? El Jaguar asked. Is it superstition that turned Javier Mendez into whatever he is now? As if summoned by the mention of his name, Javier entered the room. The men around the table tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice the changes in him. Once vibrant and quick-tempered, he now moved with mechanical precision. His eyes held no expression, and the black feather tattooed behind his ear seemed to shift slightly, as though alive. Report, El Jaguar commanded. Javier's voice emerged flat, devoid of its former swagger. Miguel Fuentes escaped. Elena Cortez was apprehended attempting to cross the border. She is being held at Site B for questioning. El Jaguar nodded. And what did you see at the outpost that night, Javier? What happened to you? For a moment, something flickered in Javier's dead eyes, a flash of terror quickly suppressed. I saw her. She entered me. I am both myself and her instrument now. His hand moved unconsciously to touch the feather tattoo. She sees through my eyes, hears through my ears. The room erupted in nervous murmurs. El Jaguar silenced them with a raised hand. So she's watching us now, he said, staring directly at Javier. Good. Then she can hear my message. Whatever grievance you think you have against my organization, whatever vendetta you're pursuing, it ends now. You've cost me money and men, but you've also made a critical mistake. He gestured to one of his lieutenants, who opened a laptop and turned it to face the table. On screen was a live feed of a woman bound to a chair in a sparse concrete room, Detective Lucia Reyes. Your federal pet has been compromised, El Jaguar continued, speaking to Javier but addressing the entity controlling him. Surrender yourself or watch her die slowly. Javier's expression didn't change, but the lights in the room flickered momentarily. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, layered now with a woman's tones, creating a disturbing harmonic effect. You mistake my interest in the detective as sentiment, the dual voice said. She is merely a tool of justice, as this body is my instrument. Kill her if you wish. There will be others. El Jaguar's composure slipped for the first time, a flash of uncertainty crossing his features. This wasn't the response he had anticipated. Before he could reply, the security chief burst into the room, his face pale. Sir, we've lost contact with the perimeter guards. All cameras on the east side have gone dark. The compound's lights flickered again, longer this time. When they stabilized, the wall-mounted television screens switched on simultaneously, each showing the same image, security footage of their own meeting room, filmed from an impossible angle above the table. Enough theatrics, El Jaguar snarled, drawing his gold-plated pistol and aiming it at Javier's head. Whatever you are, you still inhabit a mortal body. Javier smiled for the first time, a terrible, empty expression. This body is already dead. It simply hasn't accepted that fact yet. The lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness broken only by the glow of the television screens. When emergency power kicked in 30 seconds later, Javier was gone. Panic erupted around the table. Men drew weapons, shouting contradictory orders. El Jaguar alone remained seated, his expression hardening into resolve. Lock down the compound, he ordered. No one enters or leaves. Double the guard on our federal guest. He turned to his security chief. Activate Protocol Obsidian. The man paled further. Sir, that's designed for military assault, not. Do it, El Jaguar cut him off. Whatever this entity is, it bleeds, and if it bleeds, it dies. In her concrete cell, Detective Lucia Reyes worked methodically at the zip ties binding her wrists. Her captors had been professional but rushed, securing her to the metal chair but failing to check for the small ceramic blade hidden in the lining of her boot, standard equipment for undercover operations in cartel territory. She had been careless, following the mysterious text messages without adequate backup. The ambush had been well executed, suggesting her unknown correspondent had been right about the department being compromised. The last thing she remembered before waking in this cell was a sharp pain in her neck and the blurry image of a familiar face, one of her fellow detectives. The zip tie finally gave way. Lucia quickly freed her ankles and moved to the door, pressing her ear against it. 2 guards outside, judging by the conversation. Armed, certainly. The odds weren't good, but she'd faced worse. A sudden commotion outside drew her attention, shouting, followed by 2 gunshots and a heavy thud. Then silence. Lucia backed away from the door, searching for anything that could serve as a weapon. The door handle turned slowly, and she braced herself. The door swung open to reveal Javier standing over the bodies of 2 guards, his vacant eyes fixed on her. "Detective Reyes," he said in that unsettling dual voice. "We have little time." Lucia didn't move. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" "Justice," the voice replied simply. "The same thing you've sought since your family was taken from you." A chill ran through Lucia that had nothing to do with the cold cell. "How do you know about my family?" "I know about all the victims. Their memories become part of me." Javier, or whatever controlled him, held out a gun taken from one of the fallen guards. "The compound will be in chaos soon. This body will guide you to safety." Lucia hesitated, then took the weapon. "And Miguel Fuentes, is he alive?" "For now, he waits at the rendezvous point with evidence sufficient to dismantle El Jaguar's operation." Javier's head tilted slightly, as if listening to something. "They've activated their security protocols. We must move quickly." Against her better judgment, Lucia followed as Javier led her through the compound's service corridors. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and they occasionally passed bodies of guards, some dead, others unconscious, all bearing expressions of absolute terror. "You're killing them," Lucia accused as they stepped over another fallen guard. "No," came the reply. "Fear is killing them. I merely show them the truth of their souls." They reached a garage housing several vehicles. Javier moved to a nondescript SUV, opening the driver's door. "This will take you to the eastern perimeter. The fence has been disabled for exactly 7 minutes." "You're not coming." A strange smile crossed Javier's face. "This body has served its purpose. It returns to El Jaguar now to deliver a final message." Before Lucia could respond, the compound was rocked by an explosion from the main building. Smoke billowed into the night sky. "Go," Javier commanded. "Complete what we have begun." Lucia slid behind the wheel, her investigator's mind racing with questions. "Who were you before you became this?" For a moment, the dual voice separated, and only the woman's tones remained. "I was Agent Sofia Vega, DEA, until El Jaguar discovered my identity and made an example of my family." The voice hardened. "Now I am vengeance. I am justice. I am what remains when the system fails." With that, Javier's body turned and walked back toward the main compound, moving with the deliberate pace of a predator confident in its hunt. Lucia drove toward the perimeter, her mind reeling. Sofia Vega, the name was familiar from Academy legends. A deep-cover agent who had infiltrated the cartels a decade ago. Presumed killed, along with her husband and daughter, in what was officially recorded as a gas explosion at their safe house. As promised, a section of the perimeter fence had been disabled. Lucia crashed through the remaining barrier and sped into the desert night, guided by the GPS coordinates already programmed into the vehicle's navigation system. El Jaguar stood in the smoldering ruins of his security center, surrounded by the bodies of his technical team. The explosion had been precisely targeted, destroying their surveillance capabilities while leaving the structural integrity of the compound intact. This was not random destruction. This was strategy. "Sir," his security chief approached, face streaked with soot. All communications are down. We can't reach our outside teams. What about Protocol Obsidian? El Jaguar demanded. Activated, but… The man hesitated. The system is malfunctioning. The automated defenses are targeting our own men. A slow handclap echoed through the damaged room. They turned to see Javier standing in the doorway, that empty smile still fixed on his face. Impressive security, the dual voice said. The best money and fear can buy, yet here I stand. El Jaguar raised his pistol. What do you want? Why not just kill me and be done with it? Death would be a mercy you don't deserve. Javier's body began to change as they watched, the skin growing paler, features shifting subtly. You took everything from me, Alejandro, my husband, my daughter, my humanity. Recognition dawned in El Jaguar's eyes. Sofia Vega, he whispered. Impossible, I watched you burn. You watched a house burn, the voice corrected. What emerged from those flames was something new. Javier's body convulsed suddenly, black mist seeping from his pores. This vessel has served its purpose. Now you face me directly. The black mist pulled free entirely, leaving Javier's body to collapse lifelessly to the floor. The mist swirled, coalescing into a more defined female shape, still not solid, but unmistakably the silhouette of a woman in flowing garments. Where her face should be, only those terrible eyes were clearly visible. Your men have fled, the woman in black said, her voice now coming directly from the misty form. Your empire crumbles, your secrets are exposed, but your punishment is just beginning. El Jaguar fired his pistol repeatedly into the mist. The bullets passed through harmlessly, embedding themselves in the wall behind. I've survived government operations, rival cartels, and countless assassination attempts, he snarled, defiant even now. Whatever you are, you can't destroy what I've built. I don't need to destroy it, the figure replied calmly. You built your empire on fear. Now your men fear me more than they fear you. The foundation is already crumbling. She gestured to the television screens still functioning on the wall. Each showed different locations around the compound. Men fleeing, others turning on each other, vehicles speeding away into the night. Your operation ends tonight, she continued. But you, Alejandro, you I will keep alive, to witness everything you built torn down, to face justice in a court of law, to spend decades in a cell, surrounded by enemies you've made with nothing but memories of your failures. The mist surged forward, enveloping El Jaguar before he could react. He screamed, not in pain but in absolute terror as visions flooded his mind. Every person he had killed, every family destroyed, every betrayal and atrocity committed in his rise to power. But worst of all, he saw the truth of his legacy, that he would be forgotten, his empire dismantled, his name a footnote in the history of the drug wars. When federal agents stormed the compound at dawn, led by Captain Vargas and a contingent of trusted officers, they found a scene that defied explanation. The fortress had been breached not by force, but by fear, gates standing open, weapons abandoned, vehicles gone. In the main house, they discovered the cartel leadership still seated around the oak table. All 13 men were alive but catatonic, their eyes open and unblinking, faces frozen in expressions of horror. On each of their phones, the same video played on loop, detailed documentation of their crimes, their victims, their secrets, all the evidence needed for lifetime sentences. El Jaguar himself sat at the head of the table, the only one conscious. But the fearsome cartel leader was reduced to a trembling shell, muttering the same phrase over and over. She showed me everything. She showed me everything. In the final room, they found Miguel Fuentes, unconscious but unharmed, with a comprehensive dossier containing his testimony against the cartel and documents for witness protection. Around his neck hung a pendant, a black feather encased in crystal, and a note that simply read, "Some debts can be repaid." Detective Lucia Reyes was the last to enter the compound, having delivered the evidence from the rendezvous point to federal prosecutors. As she walked through the halls where she had been a prisoner just hours before, her phone buzzed with one final message from the unknown number. Justice is served, but never complete. Your parents would be proud of the woman you've become. The path you walk now is your own. Attached was a photograph she had never seen before, her parents on their wedding day, young and full of hope for the future. A future that had been stolen from them, but whose legacy continued through their daughter. Captain Vargas approached, his expression a mixture of awe and confusion. "I've never seen anything like this in 30 years of service," he said quietly. "It's like they were defeated from within." Lucia nodded, pocketing her phone. The most effective weapon against men like El Jaguar isn't bullets or bombs. It's the truth of what they've done. The woman in black understood that. "And what happens to her now?" Vargas asked. "Will she continue her mission?" Lucia looked toward the mountains, where the rising sun cast long shadows across the landscape. For just a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing on a distant ridge, a woman in flowing black, watching over the scene of her justice. "I think her work here is done," Lucia replied. "But there are other cartels, other injustices, other places where the system has failed." As if in answer, a single black feather drifted down from above, landing gently at her feet. Lucia picked it up, feeling its impossible weight, heavier than it should be, as if carrying the memory of countless victims seeking justice. Miles away, Miguel Fuentes boarded a bus to his new life, clutching the ticket and passport he had found waiting for him at the rendezvous point. As the bus pulled away, he glanced out the window at the desert landscape passing by. In the distance, a figure in black stood watching. Miguel touched the feather pendant around his neck and whispered a silent thank you. The woman in black raised her hand in acknowledgement before dissolving into the morning mist, becoming one with the shadows once more, waiting, watching, ready to emerge when justice failed and vengeance was due. For those who dealt in death and suffering, the warning would always come. "The woman in black is here. Abandon position." And those wise enough would flee, while those too arrogant to heed the warning would face a reckoning more terrible than death, the truth of their own souls reflected back at them through eyes that had witnessed the worst of humanity and refused to look away. The legend would grow, whispered among cartel members and federal agents alike. A ghost story for some, a prayer for others. La Mujer de Negro, the embodiment of justice in a world where the scales too often tilted toward the powerful and corrupt. And on lonely desert nights, when the radio crackled with unexplained static, those who knew would listen for her warning, and remember that some debts can never be escaped, only repaid.